we might turn to Google to tell us how to be a great parent before we talk to a guy that's a little further down the road than we are. It's a disservice to the generation ahead. Experts have said we're becoming sort of this peer-raised society that rather than look ahead and get input and wisdom from somebody that's ahead of us, we're just going to ask our friends. We're going to just search around for a good answer, and we're just going to go try it.
What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. of Dad Central, and beside me.
How many times have we done that and just totally messed it up? So I love your modification to beside.
Oh yeah, I don't like to do the same thing all the time. I have to keep it fresh. Keep it fresh.
Yeah, we are with Drew Solon of the Dad Central Show.
What's going on, Drew? How you doing?
I'm doing good. School is coming up as we're recording this. And also we just finished offering a second master class in our Dad Mentor community. And it was on stress and managing stress using the Shank self-reg. So some great things, great attendance, and just great insights on how to apply it. Since with school coming up, many parents, many dads could feel the stress or not, but it's good to understand how to manage those things.
Absolutely.
What's going on with you?
Well, with Drew's thinking and allowing, actually just recently did 3 facilitations about fatherhood to different groups in the Greater Toronto area, and incredible memories, incredible stories. And it was nice. One of the sessions I had a chance to facilitate, it was about 8 dads and 3 grandfathers. And that was a totally incredible experience for myself. And also the fathers and grandfathers were of a different cultural community that I am. So it was excitement. I went in with excitement there. And I wanted to share a really quick story if everyone's okay with it. I'm going to do it anyways. But I was one of the things we really want our fathers to do is realize that it's not how much time you spend with your child or children, it's what you do with the time you spend with your child or children. And I was in a conversation with these dads and these granddads, and one gentleman says, "Yeah, I do that all the time. I do it every day." I say, "Okay, when do you do this?" And he says, "I do it at 11 o'clock at night." I go, 11 o'clock at night. Most children, especially young ones, should be in bed at that time. He says, "Well, I work an afternoon shift. So when I come home, my son is waiting for me. And what we do is we go out for like a 15, 20-minute drive." And I say, that is so amazing, because a lot of times Dad would come in, even in like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and say, "I'm beat, I'm tired, I'm done." And this gentleman does spend quality time with his son. And what they do is they go out and they drive in his car and they listen to music. And I say, "You know what? You should document that." Well, ask and you shall receive. He brings out his cell phone and plays a video of his time he spent with his son the night before, and his son is jumping up and down in the passenger seat to music. It brought tears to my eyes because I'd never seen something like that. So I just, a lot of memories, but that was one of the ones that stuck out doing these facilitations about fatherhood. So I just wanted to share that story because I'm never going to forget it.
Yeah, great story, and showing that you make the connection opportunities and they happen and they're powerful.
Yeah, so that's great. But yeah, school has started in probably by the time people watch this, most of the time, it's either started or getting around the corner, and it's just gone by so fast. It is just really, where I live, there's something called the Canadian National Exhibition. It's been a fair that's run for many, many years. And once that starts, school's around the corner. So we're speaking for dads that it's going to be a great school year, not only for them, but for their families and for their children. So we're excited about a new school year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're also excited about this next conversation.
Yeah.
We've got a great guest who is going to be sharing with us, his story, but also some of the amazing work that he's been a part of. And I think for almost 20 years, he just said, maybe a little over 20 years. So, and it's something I think every father will be able to tap into and resonate, but especially maybe if you haven't had a father present, or you had a father and your father's no longer present in your life, it might be very meaningful to you. So looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. So you love to do the intros, so we're giving it to you, my man.
All right. Well, our guest is Kevin Harris. He's the president of Radical Mentoring, and he's also a dad. He's got 2 teenage sons. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you and looking forward to learning more about you and, of course, more about this idea of radical mentoring.
Hey, guys, I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for having me. This is exciting. You got, first of all, before we even do anything, you guys are doing some great work. And so thanks for just being a champion for dads. As you know, parenting it's not for the faint of heart, and we need coaches and friends, and some of our best mentors can be guys like you who just have a passion to put content out, and you don't necessarily care who gets it, but it's there and it's available, and you're probably making a deeper impact than you know just by being available and willing to share your stories. So thanks for doing what you're doing. I hope I don't mess up your work here today.
Humility.
Well, you've been doing it longer than us, so we have to turn to you,
Yeah. Lucky you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. That means a lot. I appreciate those kind words for sure. And for us, it is, I think, something Ed and I are both passionate about. And so we're honored to be able to really gain the benefit of having these conversations with, fatherhood role models, with topical experts, and just real dads. So yeah. Thanks for being here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story.
Yeah,
and more
so glad to be here. Yeah. So I can jump in on the story. You can fire away the first question, unless your first question is going to be, tell us your story. And then,
well, yeah,
I know you like to do the intro.
That's basically it. Do the intro for us. You roll it.
Yeah. So I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been married to Susan for almost 23 years next month. We've got 2 boys, 17 and 14. So we're having we're in an interesting season where you go from, as somebody said at some point along the way, the days are long, but the years are fast, or something. There was nothing more earth-shattering and mind-boggling than when a 16-year-old son drove out of the driveway on his own for the first time. That was a whole heck of a different kind of a feeling to see that happen. But I've got some great boys there. Like some of you guys have talked about, I've heard you talk about soccer and baseball. I've got 2 baseball players, and that's a huge part of just sort of the rhythm of our family, is baseball games and experiences like that together. I was born and raised in North Carolina, and we can talk a little bit about my own father experience. I'll let you guys share that or ask that question when you're ready. And on a day-to-day basis for the last 8 years, I've been on staff at this organization called Radical Mentoring, which changed my life 21 years ago, when I was able to sit around the table. A guy named Regi Campbell, who was my mentor, invited me in to be a part of his group. I was able to sit around the table with 8 other guys as we sort of entered. We were all sort of stepping into that season of newly married, some new dads. And we had a guy in Regi who was just a step or 2 ahead of us, whose real sole purpose was what God dropped on his heart, which is, I just want you to dump out what I've done in your life, and you invite these guys around the table, and you give them the opportunity to catch some of those things. And it changed me. And so 8 years ago, Regi asked me to join him, and Regi passed away 3 years ago now. So our ministry and his legacy really kind of leads on through what I get to do every day, which is connect with leaders like you guys, or pastors, or others that just really have a heart to want to coach and build up the next generation.
Wonderful. Well, condolences on the loss of your mentor. And just want to ask, though, what things did he instill in you that you carry on with today, and not only as a dad, but as a man?
Yeah, one of the biggest memories of and conversations around Reggie and I had was just this whole idea of um, forgiving your father. My dad passed away. He was in a car accident when I was 16 years old, and so it
Wow.
wasn't. I didn't hold a lot of. There wasn't a lot of grudge or animosity. We've all been 16-year-old boys. We're not always the bestest of friends with our dads at that age and stage. But what Reggie sort of drew out of me was that I just was living with kind of this unanswered tension of, did I get the best out of my dad? And that forced me to kind of just live with, there was a burden around that for me. And so one of the things, exercises Reggie sort of had us all think about was this idea of firing our fathers, which sounds a little harsher than it really is. But, forgiving and firing our fathers, forgiving them to say, look, my dad, when he passed away, he was in a job he didn't like, probably, depressed and frustrated about the money he was making and his ability to provide. And so, he did the best he could under the circumstances he was in. And it may not have been at that particular season, the best model for being a great dad. And I just had to learn to forgive him. Or in some cases, guys who need to fire their dads, who just, man, their dads were really super tough and they just carried this burden and this anger and this bitterness towards their own dads. And that just was shaping everything around how they were raising their own children. And just that idea of, you might just have to fire your dad. That was an exercise Reggie had to go through at one point. Just that idea of sitting across literally with an empty chair in front of you and having kind of a final conversation to air the things out that, your dad's wasn't, in his case, his dad wasn't sitting there. In most cases, the dad isn't, but it's the burdens that a lot of us as men share. So those were some of just those conversations that we got to have with Reggie, who just really, his desire was, I just don't want to see men, a season of life behind me, make some of the same mistakes that I have made. And so if I can just create a safe place for these guys to share their stories, to be known, out of that, conversations of faith and marriage and parenting and all those things sort of flow, but they flow out of the idea of, this is just a safe place where we can just bear some of the good, the bad, and the ugly of our souls. And so those were some of the great memories of that time with Reggie, for sure.
Oh. Well, condolences on, again, loss of and your own father. And well, we could just spend the whole conversation on that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pass it over to Drew and let him continue. Thank you for sharing, though. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, there are quite a few things that came up for me just as you were sharing that. But the last thing that came up is this idea that there are these blocks that men face, that unless you have a Reg in your life that kind of helps you recognize it, that we could be operating for a while with these blocks or these things that are preventing us from actually either achieving the things we want or becoming the people that we want to be and having the relationships we want to have. I don't know. What are your thoughts when I say that? That's kind of what came up for me as you shared it.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of sort of what we ascribe to in this mentoring relationships is, you're 100% right that we all have these blocks. And the challenge that many of us face today is whether it's pride. I don't want to ask somebody a question about parenting because I don't want them to think I don't know what I'm doing. All the stuff that we as men deal with. We might turn to Google to tell us how to be a great parent before we talk to a guy that's a little further down the road than we are. And that is just, it's a disservice to the generation ahead. Experts have said we're becoming sort of this peer-raised society that rather than look ahead and get input and wisdom from somebody that's ahead of us, we're just going to ask our friends. We're going to just search around for a good answer, and we're just going to go try it. And I think what we're trying to do, and I don't want, this is not by any means a commercial for radical mentoring, but what we really just try to do is say, hey, there's men in your life who just have a desire to want to share story and share some of the places they've been and some of the areas where they've got it right or got it wrong. And if you're willing to sort of raise your hand and step into those relationships, there's incredible value that happens. Yes, in those groups, there's some peer-to-peer conversations, but it's really a chance just to hear from somebody who's willing to say, hey, here's some things I got really wrong. Here's some things I got really, here's a great question you might want to ask your kids one of these days. That, I think that's the block is, yes, the block's there. And sometimes we do ourselves a disservice in getting the block out of the way because we're just too afraid to sort of expose what we don't know. And so we'd rather fake it till we make it. And in the case of parenting, you're molding and shaping another life. Tony Evans says, every man needs to be a 3-generation thinker. Mm-hmm. We need to be thinking, what in the world is going on ahead of us? How am I going to be raising these kids? What's going to be happening with grandkids? There's a generational impact that's 3 generations wide that we just need to be really, really aware of. And if we're bumping into blocks, that's not going to help us sort of hit that, get through some of those challenges that we know are on the way.
Yeah. Which when I hear that 3 generations idea, a word that comes up is legacy. But then when you say hitting these blocks and being able to make some choices, I hear it sounds like, the idea of intentionality, being very intentional, and which has come up time and time again on our show, Ed. We've talked about it, I think, a lot. So dads or anyone listening, yes, intentional seems to be very important and very relevant. Maybe I'll ask one more. It's taking us in a little bit of a different path,
but
it's
great.
It goes with the idea of, being ahead of somebody and seeking, input and guidance and advice. And, I think there might be dads who, and I think Ed even has a close relationship with someone who have recently lost their own father. Mm-hmm. And, you had that experience, and you've had so what would you say to somebody who is maybe listening and they've recently lost their father, or, maybe they don't have as much time has passed since you have passed. So what advice or what guidance could you share to them to help them where they're at right now?
Yeah, I think, as we've done predominantly work with men, at the end of the day, if you sort of look at issues for men around fatherhood, father wounds, marriage, all those other things, the core issue for most guys is an identity issue. That at the end of the day, if they haven't, and I'm going to look at it through the lens of a follower of Christ and a Jesus follower. If they can't look and understand that they're fearfully and wonderfully made, that they were knit together in their mother's womb, that they're one of one, that there's nobody else like them in the world, that if they can't grasp that identity problem, then they're going to be always looking somewhere for some approval and some affirmation. And they're just going to be let down. And for so many men, and this is not, it's not criticism of our dads, our understanding that our dads did the best they could. They only knew what they knew. And for some of us, it is, we may go to our dads in those last seasons trying to get some affirmation we never got before from them, which is unfair to our dad. It's unfair for us to put this unspoken expectation of here's what I desire for my dad to say about me and know about me. And because that may not have been how he was raised or how his dad was raised. And so if we can get the identity piece figured out, that creates so much freedom to love, that creates so much freedom for us to receive love, knowing that, the words somebody says about me, a dad, a friend, whoever, it pales in comparison to the way our Heavenly Father views us. And so I think even if you've just lost a dad, understanding that, so many guys, the ceiling for the way they see God it bumps into the way they see their dads. And so if we can sort of not discount our dads, but understand just the right healthy level of perspective around just the roles of our earthly fathers, and then the view that our Heavenly Father has of us. If we can get those things right, it just helps us in all those situations. That was my issue. I was 16, so I didn't have a lot of life perspective. But I sat with Regi for the first in 2002. So I was, I was 10 years at post losing my dad. And Regi was just a guy that could kind of look at me and go, if you don't, if you don't change your view, you don't change your perspective, if you can't understand that God didn't do this to you, that he wants something for you, then you're going to kind of live your life, your spiritual life, as this somewhat bitter, unhappy guy that just thinks God was against him for some reason. And you got to get through some of that stuff. And so, it took me a while to deal with it. It's not easy. Dads it's that whole 3-generation thing. Dads are really, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like how you says, we have to be real and honest here. Sometimes they have to go through things. And I'm a firm believer, sometimes in order to get through, you've got to go through.
You got it. Yeah.
You got to go through. So, Drew, you want me to jump in or you want to continue on?
Yeah, hop in then.
Okay. Again, we could spend like four days on all of this stuff. I'm going to transition a little bit and say, and let us tell our audience, what has your journey been like being a dad? Have you had any fears, hopes along the way that you've encountered and had to?
Nope. None of that stuff.
We can shut down now.
Yeah. Drew was talking about stress with dads earlier. Don't understand that. Should I tell you about this morning? Do you want to hear about that?
You can talk about anything you want.
It's been Gary Thomas in Sacred Marriage talks about, your marriage being the mirror by which you really view, you can view yourself. Parenting for me has been a really, really big challenge. And as I've had to tell my boys multiple times, especially over the last couple of years, I've said, you're now at the age where I lost my dad. And wow. So, I have now run out of all my examples. Like I didn't know I didn't know I wasn't parented when I was 15, 16, 17 years old because I didn't have a dad. So I am learning this as we go. I had a talk this morning with my son my 17-year-old on the way home about identity. Again, we talked about it earlier. Just this idea that, we had a parent teacher conference. Our kids have been in school for a week, and his counselor was talking to him about how she wants to see him really grow into who he is and not be so burdened by all the pressure and all the noise and all the conversations around us. And if, we don't make a baseball team, that can, create all kinds of angst in us. And my conversation with him this morning was like, buddy, do you want to know why I'm sometimes an angry, I can come across as an angry and disgruntled dad? It's not because I don't love you. It's not because I'm just angry and disgruntled. Oftentimes it's just because I'm trying to keep everybody at distance because something's happened that's keeping me from wanting to expose my soul to you because I want you to see me in a certain way. And so this identity thing is not something you figure out as a 16-year-old or, by the way, as a 48-year-old. It's a constant reminder that, you've got to, I got to hear Tim Tebow speak last night. He just talked about that song, The Voice of Truth by Casting Crowns. And that idea that, man, the voice of truth is going to tell you a different story. It's going to tell you not to be afraid. It's going to tell you, the shame can't conquer you. And so, those are just I'm trying to just instill, again, I talked about Andy Andrews, who's just a really great author, but I don't want Thomas to be a great kid. I don't want my son Bo to just be a great kid. I want him to be able to think what a great adult. I'm trying to see them as Thomas is going to be out of he's going to be out of the home. And I want him to be able to process identity when he's sitting in his dorm room and he realizes he's not the smartest kid on the freshman hall, that he's not as popular as he was when he was known by everybody in high school. And so I'm just trying to find those things. But parenting is really, it's been obviously it's a great reward, but it's really hard. And I think, as you guys know this, I know this is a dad conversation, but the greatest gift we give our kids is a stable home, a loving and a caring marriage. And if they can see that, if they can see how Susan and I relate to each other, how we're aligned and what we want for them, if they can just see that emotional stability and that relational stability in our marriage, which, by the way, comes from us both being closely connected to Christ, the boys they have a greater chance of sort of feeling like they're in a safe environment. And so if that quasi answered your question, I took it about
No
six
problem.
different directions,
Dude,
which sometimes happens with me. I open my mouth.
No,
and
it's
then my
okay.
mind starts working.
It's all good. I want to go a little bit deeper on this because I think there's a good
please.
Opportunity here for a lot of dads. Because what you shared with us is that you are very open and honest with your sons.
Yeah.
With your kids. Not all dads are that way.
No.
So
it's hard.
It's hard. So is that a place you started from, or did you have to grow into that phase of being a dad?
I had to grow into that as a husband. I had to grow into it as a friend. And then I've grown into it as a dad. Not with, I've had some issues with depression. And I've just wrestled with, it's exhausting to pretend. It's exhausting to put a mask on if I've got to be somebody at work, and then I got to come home and put my mask on because I got to be somebody at home. And then I'm going to my kids' baseball games and I got to put a mask on because I want, I'm comparing myself to the other baseball dads. And I've just, I just have gotten to a place in my own life where I don't have it figured out, but when I'm at my best, I'm completely confident in who Christ is in me. And because of that, I'm able to share more openly with people just about the things that are really going on, because I've gotten to where it's just too hard. Because and it usually takes one person. This is what you guys are doing, right? You're trying to get to a place where you don't want dads to have to fake it. You're trying to create a place where you guys are living your dad life in front of others on this podcast, on the seminars you're doing, in the masterclass. And what you're doing is you're just modeling. You told your story earlier. You were talking about moments, this idea that Mark Batterson says time is measured in minutes, but life is measured in moments. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, and then this guy shows me his phone and I'm weeping. That's not because you're trying to be just tough, when I told him to put his phone down and said, men don't cry. I mean, it's just a lot easier to live this authentic, true, well-grounded, anchored in life in Christ, and let that be the way that you're choosing to live. Because if you're not doing it, your kids won't. My boys won't see it if I'm not living that way. So they want to understand how to be a great friend. They want to understand how to be a great husband. They want to understand how to be a great teammate if they're just trying to put on this mask of I've got it figured out. And man, when you look at the depression rates, the suicide rates, the anxiety rates, we can see how that play is run. And I just don't want to see my kids, my boys specifically, I don't want to see them 15 years down the road just in that same position I was in. And so it's
wonderful.
It's just a passion of mine, just to be real.
That's good stuff. Thank you. I want to bless you for what you just shared. I think there are some fathers, whatever age, that need to hear that. So thank you, Drew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to just build on that because I think the important concept or idea here is the idea of emotional and psychological safety, and how crucial that is, because what you're essentially doing is creating an emotionally and a psychologically safe place for your sons by you modeling it, what you're referring to yourself, by being authentic yourself, by being vulnerable yourself. You're helping them feel that it's safe for them to be authentic and safe for them to be vulnerable. And I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it, but I think that's a very important place. But recognizing much of the world that we're in is unsafe. Or can feel very unsafe. And so I think, I also heard it described, the dean of our School of Business right now she's a African American woman, and she's spent a lot of her time, in the U.S. She's American, but she talked about when she was a faculty member in North Carolina, actually, and having to put on her armor before she would leave her home to get to work. And so the recognition is that there's a lot of people who it's not safe to be authentic. It's not safe to be real, because what they're going to do is they're going to attack.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an important concept here of, recognizing at home is where it should be safe. And we want to create those safe places in our homes, but also recognizing that as parents, we also have a responsibility to model, healthy,
Yes.
wisdom about where and how and when to do that, and to find the people who can create those spaces for you.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is more just me talking, but I think it's very crucial, this authenticity, this another point maybe you can talk more about, because I think it's valuable, is the amount of energy. You said it's exhausting to wear masks. Can you talk more about that? And how would one recognize that, or how did you recognize that was going on for you?
I saw it in my dad. I'll tell you that before he passed away, as I mentioned, being in a job he didn't love, he would come home and he would just sort of plant himself in the recliner and put the television on and read the paper and just disconnect. And to me at the time, I didn't know exactly what all that was, but that was his way to try to get himself recharged again, knowing that he was having to he was stepping back into the home. And so I think, for me, it's understanding what gives me life. It's understanding what takes life from me. It's understanding that maybe it's okay if I need to sit in the car for 10 minutes when I'm in the driveway, just to realign, say the serenity prayer, whatever it might be, to just sort of go, I know I can't give my family my best if I don't take a few minutes just to calm myself down. And I think it's emotional awareness, it's emotional intelligence, all those things sort of play into that. And I think it's just, I see it I was in the financial services career before I started doing radical mentoring. I was traveling every week, and I was going into all these appointments and calling on financial advisors, and it was not my passion or my purpose. I was out of alignment. And that's when my depression started to kick in over time, is because I was having to pretend to be somebody that somebody else wanted me to be, so that I could show myself to be in the right career, making the right amount of money, trying to do all the things. And over time, it just broke me down more and more and more. And so for me, I just have a really good awareness of that in my own life, to can go, okay. And my wife knows it. I can come home today and I'll be energized with a smile on my face because of our conversation. Because she knows it's life-giving to me to be able to talk about radical mentoring, to talk about fatherhood, to talk about my family. Those are the things that bring me life, not days this week when I'm in a spreadsheet and I'm looking at finances and all. I can walk in and she can go, "Yep, you didn't have a great day today." I can't. I'm just not great at faking it. And I can go in there and try to give it the old try, but over time, I just know I fall short on that, and I've just had to learn that about myself. And sometimes it made me, I have to, in these mentoring relationships, sometimes it's an older guy looking at a younger guy and going, I can see where this thing's headed. And I just want you to know, that's why I love mentoring young guys, newly married with young kids, because when my life went off the rails, it was right there. Wow. And so that's my pain and my story. And that's why I love connecting with guys in that age and phase of life.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs, but not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this father thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads. Well, I feel like that's a great segue into this process or idea of mentoring. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about Radical Mentoring, maybe how it got started, and we can build from there.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, and I'll just, you guys will talk about this, but it's radicalmentoring.com. You'll see our website. It's got free resources on it, and it just outlines the entire mentoring process, and you can connect with somebody. So don't, if you're listening and thinking, this sounds great, I can't take notes fast enough, I'm sure it'll be in the show notes and all that stuff. So Radical Mentoring started. Regi, our founder, was a business guy. And he found himself meeting one-on-one with a lot of guys who wanted his time and attention. So he'd be at a Starbucks or in Atlanta, he'd be at a Waffle House, drinking a cup of coffee and pouring his life into a guy. And this guy would be saying, I've got a problem with my wife. I've got a problem with my work. And Regi would feel like he was putting, a piece of bubble gum on a dam that was about to break. And so he heard a guy by the name of Tim Elmore say, more time with fewer people is a greater kingdom impact. More time, fewer people, greater kingdom impact. And so Regi decided in 2001, he wasn't launching a ministry. It was Regi going, I've got a list of about 30 guys who I'm driving all over town, seeing off and on. I'm going to invite those guys to be a part of a mentoring group. I'm going to grab 8 books off my bookshelf. I'm going to open up my Bible and pull out scripture that we can memorize. I'm going to make up some homework assignments and have them do some things. I'm going to borrow some homework assignments from other places that I've seen. And I'm just going to say, we're going to meet once a month for 3 hours. We're going to meet for a year. And you are going to be my 8 guys. And he did it once. And then out of that group, he had another list of guys, and I was in that second list. I got an email in late, probably November of 2001, and all it said was, write your obituary and send it back. And that was how I applied to be a part of Regi's mentoring group. And so in 2002 in January, I didn't know Regi from anybody. I walked into his house and sat around a table with 8 other guys, and we did this same journey together. And so that's really how it started. It was just Regi's own little project that he was working, but he just wanted to make sure he was maximizing his time and really being intentional with a smaller group of guys. He did that for probably 5 or 6 years. 4 or 5 guys around Atlanta hear about it. A few Atlanta churches hear about it. Regi wakes up one day and writes down what God put on his heart was that he was really just doing what Jesus did. And so he wrote this book called Mentor Like Jesus. And he was in a group. It was a defined period of time. It was not about teaching. It was about facilitating and modeling. It was about sending out on assignment, coming back in, debriefing. It was about memorizing scripture. And so he just sort of outlined it in this book, and then it picked up its way into a couple other churches along the way. And so it really started to grow just out of Regi's burden. And then Regi was a guy that uniquely was always looking around for younger guys who he could invite in. You know, so many guys, you know, me included, think this idea of mentoring sounds really great, but we don't know 6 to 8 younger guys that we could invite to be a part of it. Regi was just wired differently. He just wanted to make sure that, you know, I mean, I found a picture yesterday of Regi with his last mentoring group. He mentored about 150 guys around Atlanta about a month before he died. And he's got 8 guys sitting around his recliner that he's mentoring. A month before he goes to meet Jesus face to face. He was just on purpose. And so, you know, over time, more churches heard about it, more leaders heard about it. And so what's happened is ultimately we've gotten to a place where, you know, we now work with almost 550 churches in 42 states and 14 countries around the world. This little book, Mentor Like Jesus, has been translated into Spanish. It's been translated into Arabic. I was in Egypt last November training leaders. There's about 100 leaders, men and women, going through a mentoring group in and around the Middle East right now. About 20, I think I said 23,000. We have a men's process and a women's process that kind of go side by side. And so in our heart of our ministry is we give it away. You know, anybody can create an account. Anybody can find our resources. Anybody could launch a group and they wouldn't have to tell us what they did. But the joy of our ministry is partnering with people who want to get this right. And so we come alongside leaders and churches and just walk them through the journey so that we can see it work. And then we can, you know, then we ultimately get funded by those who've been impacted by the ministry. It allows me to do this sort of stuff, to be able to say, hey, this Dad's Central audience, come check it out. Poke around, see what you like. There's, you know, it's not just a fatherhood mentoring. It covers, you know, the idea is, at least for men, we want to get story right. We want to make sure guys understand their stories. We want to get them to understand grace and theology and identity and some of those core things. And if we can get those core things right, then conversations about marriage and parenting and community, all that stuff it can flow out of the core idea that, you know, that we are one with Christ and Christ is with us. And from there we can, you know, the mentoring piece sort of flows from that and it goes into other areas of life.
Nice. Wow. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Go ahead, Drew.
Well, I've experienced it, been through it this past year as part of the church that I've been in. So I can say from that experience, you know, I understand the process, and it is more all encompassing, right? And it's what I think is, when I looked at the experience, the ability to relate in an authentic way with other men is something that most men are hungry for.
Yeah.
At least all the men who were in the group that I was, when we were at the beginning saying like what you're hoping to get out of this group, that was to a man what was expressed. And so I think that this creates a safe place for men to do that, to connect in authentic, real ways and be vulnerable. Of course, every group is different, every dynamic is different, but that is, I think, a fundamental need, especially we've all gone through the pandemic, the isolation, the loneliness. It's only exacerbated by, I think, the world that we live in, as far as with these digital devices, everyone's stuck in their face. Excuse me. So there's a lot that is coming against men or just people.
Yeah, that's right.
With the world we live in now. And so to be able to create that environment is, I think, very powerful. And it's something that, you know, we aim to do as well here with that Dad Central. But anyways, so can you talk to us from the perspective of somebody who may be listening to this and be like, you know what, this is interesting to me. I'd love to get a mentor, whether they can join a radical mentoring group or not. Like, can you talk about what's a process someone would go through to be able to start to find a mentor, and then maybe talk about the value of mentoring, just as far as what somebody takes away from that process?
Yeah, what we hear consistently is the life change that happens for the mentor is oftentimes greater than the life change that happens in the mentees. That, the mentoring is a calling. It's a identity that gets ascribed over time. It's not, if you want to mentor to just get a gold star, or get some attention, or get somebody to say, hey, congratulations, Kevin's a mentor, you're in it for the wrong reason. If your desire is to change and impact the next generation and see generational impact happen, mentoring is to me, it's a great way to do it. And ours is just a framework. Yes, there's books, and yes, there's assignments, but as you so beautifully said, Drew, the idea is amazing things happen when men can be in community like that, where, you share your stories first, and you kind of go all in, and, the mentor usually leads the way, and the mentees will follow at the same space and pace that the mentor does. Once you get those stories shared, it takes a couple months for guys to kind of get into the rhythm of it. But I mean, on my board today are two of the guys that were in my group in 2002. I will see two or three of them. They've been involved in golf tournaments we do and other community things. Most of them had led groups on their own. These are guys I didn't know when I walked in the room with them in 2002. And it could have just been a small group experience, but it was more than that. And so that's just an amazing thing that happens for the guy that thinks this sounds great and I really want a mentor. That's part of the challenge is, the one-on-one mentoring relationships can be beautiful, but they can also be a burden, because there's that feeling of, all right, am I leading this? Are you leading this? And what are we supposed to talk about this time? But sometimes it's just, hey, you see there's a guy that you've seen at church or at work, or somebody's in your neighborhood, and there's a prompting in your spirit that says, man, I just would like, Drew's operating his life a little differently. There's something about the way Drew is parenting. Somebody sees you're watching your kids play soccer. There's something different about that. Something different about the way Ed's operating in the workplace. I'm going to be bold enough to say, hey, can we go grab a cup of coffee? I just want to hear part of your story. And that's kind of, I hate to say that's as complicated as it needs to be the first time we get together, but that's really,
doesn't have to be anything more than that.
Yeah. I watched how you encouraged your son on the baseball field, and I just wanted to hear more about why you're operating. You don't yell at your son like all us other crazy dads do. Why is that? Can we sit down and have a cup of coffee? Most guys would say, yes, absolutely, sign me up. And then guess what happens oftentimes after that? It ends up being a second cup of coffee. The harder part is then, how do you get the relationship, and how do you, get them to see radical mentoring is not a great fit in that one-on-one context. But I do think it's just being humble enough to recognize you haven't got it all figured out, and bold enough to go ask somebody to go sit down with them, have a cup of coffee. And that's how those relations, that's how Regi started it. He just happened to be a guy that a lot of young guys wanted to hang out with.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because he was cool or handsome or whatever. They just saw something different in how he was raising kids and what his marriage looked like. And they just said, hey, I just want to hear more about it. So he just started, as a mentor, started just to accumulate names, and ultimately just said, hey, do you guys want to join me in a group?
Yeah, I love that, because most of the time I meet a man or a father the first time, and you said it there, I say, tell me your story. Because they've never had the opportunity to just let it all out. And I tell them, I said, I want you to be empty.
Yeah.
I want you, because from my experience, there's a lot of men and fathers out there that are screaming and nothing's coming out.
You got it. Yeah.
So I want them to be.
I'm going to quote you on that one.
Okay, no problem. But yeah, because the thing is, they've never had a chance to just get it out. You know, like there was a movie many years ago for melanated women called "Waiting to Exhale." Well, there's guys out there that want to wait to exhale too.
You got it. Yep.
So
if you're 99% known, you're unknown.
Love that.
Find a guy, maybe it's a peer, maybe it's a mentor, that you can share that last 1% with. Who's the guy you're going to pick up the phone at 3 a.m. when you wake up in a panic and you got to call somebody? Who's that guy? And if you don't have them,
there's a problem, big problem.
You better just, if you don't have them, then guess what? Most of the guys around you don't have them either.
Yeah. And
so just be humble enough and bold enough to say, hey, Drew, we've spent a bunch of time together, but I just want to know if I were to pick up the phone and call you and I really needed you, I want you to be that kind of friend for me. So let's share that last 1% with each other and just commit.
I know I'm going to add one more little thing because I know Drew time is running over a bit, but
I bet Drew really he's the producer on this thing. I can tell.
My mentor says, one of my main mentors I've known for 30 years, he says every guy should have at least one guy that he has vault conversations with.
You got it.
Meaning that when you have those conversations, they're locked in the vault, and the only people that can access them is the people who are having that conversation. And when I heard that, I said, no, vault conversations.
That's why at the beginning of our mentoring groups, there's typically a covenant that gets signed. And one of the things it says on that covenant is, this is confidential. This group is highly confidential. You're not talking to your wife about it. It's just what happens around this table needs to stay at this table. And that's how that community grows quickly.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Well, to me, that's trust.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Trust and that safety. And everyone needs some place where they have a trusted friend, confidant, advisor, where they can feel authentic. They can be their authentic, real selves and get that stuff
and not love less for it.
That's right.
Not judged. Absolutely.
There are environments where you can be fully known, and then you can be judged. In the South, it'd be those bless your heart groups, or I'm just going to pray for you, and you know what that means. But you want to be in an environment where you can be fully known, the good, the bad, the ugly, and not judged because of it.
Yes.
And those are special places where the gospel shows up and grace shows up and life transformation happens, which is what I care about, what you guys care about, and what Radical Mentoring is all about.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks so much. It's been a great conversation. Really enjoyed learning about your story and, of course, the value of the mentoring process, but also the format and structure of Radical Mentoring and how it's transforming people all over the world. So thank you so much for being here. Really honored.
You're welcome, guys. I'm cheering you on and glad to be in it with you. Let's keep working together.
Awesome.
And where can people get in touch with Radical Mentoring? We have it there, but love you to say it again.
Yeah, radicalmentoring.com. If you're desperate, just pick up the phone and call me. My number is 770-710-7596. I'd love to reach out to you, or Kevin at radicalmentoring.com. I'm here to help.
Wonderful. Well, Ken, we want to, Drew and myself and our family here at Dad Central want to say thank you and your team for what you have done, are doing, and will be doing. And want to say again, thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule. And as I always like to say, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and make sure you give yourself grace.
You got it. This has been the highlight of my day. Thanks, guys.
All right. Your wife will know you did something good today when she sees you. You can call you and tell you hung out with us. And
if she says different, I'm calling you guys and telling you. Okay. We'll have to do it again.
And another thing I love about you too, Kevin, I love you like to laugh. That's important for our dads. Very important.
Let's do it.
All right. Take care, Kev.
Thank you.
Oh, Drew, that was wonderful. Loved it. Well, what did you take home from today's epic conversation?
I think that last part about be humble, but be bold, because it is important to take that step out to get the either help, the support, the connection, the relationship that's going to help you getting what you want ultimately. And so I think isolation fear. It impacts dads a lot. And I think that's a big takeaway for me from this conversation.
Nice. I could spend the next 2 hours on it, but I think one of the things off the top of this shiny head that I took away is just being honest with yourself, because every dad, every man has a kryptonite. And it's important that that dad or that father or that man can share that with someone and have those vault conversations, have that vault conversation partner. I know very much you're a believer in the community aspect. And I think that just screamed throughout this conversation today about having that community. And I want to challenge the dads out there. Like Kevin said, if you have a challenge at 3:00 in the morning, can you call somebody? And is that person going to say, why are you calling me? Or where do you need me? So I think that's really large. So great conversation. Yeah, that one we may have to have a part 2 on that one, because that was knowledge bomb, bang, bang, bang. So as always, we like to say that the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, and because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. Also, if you want, we want you to. We got our podcast website, dadcentral.ca/podcast. Listen to all our episodes. Email us. Also, review us on whatever platform you are watching or listening to our conversations on. Please, would love that, and provide us suggestions, other guest suggestions. And finally, lots of free resources on dadcentral.ca. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen or watch this epic conversation. As always, remember to give yourselves grace. And don't just manage your time, manage your energy. We'll see you soon. Take care.